My name is Bruce Lyman, and I'd like to thank the Sydney Mechanics School of Arts and the Thomas Keneally Centre for the opportunity to talk about Flowers of Baghdad. Flowers of Baghdad is a novel that is grounded in experiences that I had in Baghdad in 2007 when I visited there on business. But in the course of doing business, I met local people who really impressed me with the fact that they were living in a war zone but conducting their lives just as if they were not in a war zone. And two people stood out for me. One was a gentleman who I passed on the street, and he was clearly a stall holder, a businessman of some sort, and I fancied at the time that he was a shirt seller, and he was standing in a part of Baghdad that was quite clearly shattered, and the debris of buildings and just the ruin of war really surrounded his stall, and I wondered how on earth he could ever make any business where he was located. And the other gentleman was one that I was made aware of. He was a former Republican guard, and he was being debriefed by the Americans, and I was impressed with the fact that he had managed to get to the Americans and do that safely. I hoped that that was safe, and so in my mind I created a character that's reflected in this book, where he confessed to building IEDs, roadside bombs and the like, and he was trying to make amends for that. How was it that he could get himself to the Americans and do that safely without his handlers, his Iraqi handlers, without his Iraqi handlers discovering what he was doing and perhaps killing him and his family? I wrote, in the course of my time in Baghdad, I wrote a series of blogs. In fact, every day I blogged, and it was actually the blogs that became the basis of the book. Over a period of 12 months after my visit, these two characters kind of wrote their own story in my mind, and then I sat down and in the course of 4 weeks took my blog and constructed the story. So the actual writing of the story was quite quick. The editing process took another 2 years or so, and but at the end of that, I had a story where I had these two characters that whose lives reflected a normalcy that I saw in Iraq, but also a really unique life as well, where they were trying to survive, trying to provide for their families, and otherwise just be as normal as they possibly could. Baghdad's a city about the same size as Sydney. There's about 5 million people there, and I think sometimes we forget that, or we're even not aware of it. And so that was something that I tried to bring out in the novel, that imagine a city the size of Sydney in a conflict, and how is it that we would how would we live? How would we manage without water? How would we manage with broken sewer systems? How would we manage without work? And these are the attributes that I tried to reflect in the lives of these two principal characters. The title comes from the concept which is reflected in the Quran, where there's a line that encourages each of us to be the flower in the life of other people, the fragrance, the beauty, and the positive and beautiful things in the lives of other people. That people contribute fragrance into the lives of other people. And it's a line from the Quran that my shirt seller lives by. It becomes almost a creed for him, and he's encouraging his family and his colleagues to live with this fragrance, to contribute fragrance into the lives of other people. And he does that despite traumatic things happening to him, and ironically traumatic things happening to him via the hands of someone he thinks is his friend, who unwittingly creates scenarios which damage his family. Despite those appalling things, my shirt seller character continues to be a flower of Baghdad, and hence the title. The whole writing process, if I was to encourage anyone down this road, is really summed up by Stephen King, who simply said, if you want to write, just write. And it was on discovering that I felt unleashed with my writing. I had a background of doing deep analytical, political analysis work, and I tended to research the facts as much as I could before I wrote the narrative. And what I found, taking Stephen's advice, was if I simply wrote, then I could worry about the facts coming together later. And that's really how Flowers of Baghdad came together. I sat down and just wrote, and the novel came together, including the structure, pretty much. So, yeah, if I was to encourage anyone in the writing game, it would be simply to get pen to paper and or fingers to keyboard and simply write, and in a stream of consciousness perhaps, but write nonetheless. So that's really a quick summary of what Flowers of Baghdad is about, and a little insight into how the writing process worked for me. It was blog based, and it was very much driven by the idea that if I wanted to get a novel out, then I'd just simply start writing.